Welcome, welcome. Very glad to have you all with us today and to talk about Europe's energy needs in the Israeli occupation, addressing the EU's common interest projects and Israel's illegal exploitation of Palestinian fossil fuel resources, followed by an interesting discussion with our speakers organized by Penguin Friends of the Earth Palestine. Allow me at this point to welcome our speakers, Dr. Abdulrahman Al-Tamimi, Chairperson of Palestinian Environmental NGO Network, Penguin Friends of the Earth Palestine, Ms. Natasha Ayonu, Project Manager at Friends of the Earth Cyprus, and Dr. Susan Power, Head of Legal Research and Advocacy at Al-Haq. Also, please allow me and welcome with me our special guest, Ms. Margaret Oken, from the Greens European Free Alliance in the European Parliament. Thank you for being with us today. So since the Israeli occupation of the West Bank and Gaza Strip in 1967, the Palestinian people have been systematically deprived of access.
When I send the draft, you will see, because I'm in the Zoom, Daniel, now. But when I send the draft to you, I will.
Dr. Tamimi, can you put your Zoom on mute, please?
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. So as I've been saying, that the Palestinians have been systematically deprived of accessing and using their land and natural resources. This, of course, extends to fossil fuel resources. Recently, Israel has begun to develop new oil and gas fields in the Eastern Mediterranean solely for its own benefit. In this online session, we're going to focus on Israel's theft and exploitation of Palestinian fuel resources. We're going to talk about the joint energy projects between Israel and Europe, how these projects will deepen the EU's complicity with Israel's violations of international law, and how they will deepen the EU's dependence on fossil fuels, putting into questions the EU's ability to meet its climate targets. We're going to start with our chairperson, Dr. Tamimi, to give us a small speech about Israel's violation and exploitation of the Palestinian resources, and also the network's position on these energy projects between Israel and Europe. Please, Dr. Tamimi, the floor is yours.
Yes. First of all, good morning, and for the people who have time differences, good evening. Thank you, Russia, for the presentation and the opening remarks. My presentation will be about the Palestinian and NGOs, environmental NGOs' vision on East Mediterranean gas and the Israeli violation of the Palestinian rights, and also of the international rights, because to cover or to protect the natural resources is also concerning the whole international community. In my opinion, and in using the 10 minutes, golden 10 minutes given by Russia, the problem with the Israeli actions in the Eastern Mediterranean has multi-dimensional violations. The first dimension is political. I think the Israelis' actions without consultation and also without protecting and respecting the Palestinian rights in the Eastern Mediterranean, the resources in not only gas or in the sea, in the Mediterranean Sea. Actually, they use that gas as its own resources. Resolution Palestine include Gaza is under occupation, and the yes. Sorry, I have a technical problem. Back to the subject. I think the Israelis, they have obligation by international law to protect and also to use, if they are going to use the natural gas for the people, for the benefits of the people under occupation. That's the political dimension of the issue. In summary and very brief, the Israelis, they don't protect and respect the Palestinian rights. The second thing, they don't negotiate and consult with the Palestinian Authority about the actions taken by Israeli companies or international companies contracted by Israelis. That's from political point of view. From economic point of view, this reserve of natural gas should be used to benefit and to improve the socio-economic conditions of Gaza people, not to use it by Israelis and to have agreement with Israelis, particular from Europe or from Greece or from Cyprus or from Arab countries, to have joint investment and joint venture with Israelis. We think this is illegal, and also this is a violation to the international law, and this reserve nowadays or in the future should be used to benefit the Palestinian people, especially the socio-economic conditions in Gaza Strip. That's also from economic point of view. Israeli is violation the Palestinian right for future viable and prosperous state. Because this is maybe the only natural resources in Palestine, and that's gas can contribute remarkably the Palestinian economy. Now, from a technical point of view, also the Israelis, they construct as a pipeline, and they give investment contract to the different international companies, not only without consult of the Palestinians, but also without consultation with other Arab countries like Lebanon and Syria, which is part of the owners of the reserves, part of their jurisdiction. And this is, in our point of view, this is lead to instability in the area. And all of you are aware about the current conflict between Lebanon and Israel about the reserves fields of the gas. That's why the Israelis also, it's part of or the main driver of instability of the area. And if there is a war happened between Lebanon and Syria and Israel, sorry, the whole region will pay the cost. And also the sea, if the Hezbollah or Lebanon forces and Israelis has a conflict in the sea, of course, all of us, will pollute the sea, and Palestinian shores will be one of the victims of this war. That's also, it's a problem. Now, coming to the role of Europe, unfortunately, and I want to speak it in very transparent way, Europe has two phases. The first phase is supporting the Palestinians by lip services, nothing done. Of course, sometimes they give us some economic aid or financial aid to the specific projects. But if you look to the Israeli-Europe relationship regarding gas and other issues, it's increasing, and Europe doesn't use that relationship, economic military relationship and other kinds of relationship cannot used by Europe as a tool to change the Israelis' policy and to give the Palestinians room in Israeli policy to have their own rights, and at the same time to have to have their political interest. Unfortunately, Europe, as Europe, I mean EU, or as individual countries, they don't make any pressure on Israelis to change their policies toward their policies on occupied Palestinian territories. We don't see any pressure from Europe to ask the Israelis to give up, to lift the blockade of Gaza. Gaza is a closed area since 16 years, and nobody raised voices. That is really making Gaza economic situation, social situation, humanitarian situation very, very bad, and increasing this worsening of the situation with time. But we don't see any European country using the economic relationship with Israelis to force Israel to give up and lift the blockade on Gaza. If I summarize my ideas, I will summarize as following. The first one, international relations is not, it is not a public relation. It is mutual benefits, and I think the Europeans with Israelis, they have mutual benefits, especially after post-Ukrainian conflict. Europe needs gas, and the only available and accessible resource now is the Eastern Mediterranean gas, and part of it also in Algeria. And Europe doesn't use this opportunity to force Israel, because Israel will be the biggest beneficiary of this exporting the gas to Europe, to force Israel to change their policies. The second thing, which is important also, Europe and Israel and other Eastern Mediterranean, they don't take into consideration any environmental impact, and they don't care. They care now how to substitute or to replace the gas coming from Russia, without taking any consideration the environmental impact, the political impact, and the economic impact of other nations like Palestinians. The third thing also, we do understand the economic benefits of Israelis, but this economic benefit the Palestinians has shared, and the Palestinians they have to benefit from that gas. And unfortunately, Europe closed the eyes on the Palestinian Authority silence, because they will take that gas directly from Israelis without any bureaucracy or any political concerns. That's why I think you are, as a environmentalist, as a human rights activist, as a European organization, Palestinian organization, Middle Eastern organizations, Mediterranean individuals, we have the ethical, let me say, consideration to raise our voice, first of all, to protect the Palestinian rights on the natural resources in the Eastern Mediterranean, because it's maybe gas or others, or other natural resources. The second thing, to call to stop the double face of Europe when the issue comes to Israel. Europe, they give us lip services, but they give Israelis economic opportunities. This is, in very brief, our Palestinian environmental NGOs views, and we rely on you to raise this question wherever and whenever possible. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Tamimi. Thank you for highlighting the Israeli violations on the Palestinian rights in their natural resources. Allow me now to welcome our next speaker, Ms. Natasha Ayonu. I wish I pronounced your last name right. Project Manager at Friends of the Earth, Cyprus. Ms. Natasha, as an environmental activist, will talk more about the EU's position on major energy projects in Europe, including these two projects that we're talking about today. And she will specifically focus more on the EastMed pipeline project. Ms. Susan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Don't worry about the surname. I mean, it's a little bit complicated as such. Can I share my screen?
Okay. Of course. Yes, please go ahead.
I think you can see my screen now. Yeah, it's the screen okay. I cannot see anyone, so please.
The screen is okay. Yes, please.
Okay, thank you very much. So yeah, today I will try and focus and give a very brief introduction of what is going on in Cyprus in terms of fossil gas and in terms of energy security and other human rights in Cyprus. Just a brief introduction about the energy situation in Cyprus, how we are heavily dependent on importing fossil fuels. So we are still importing crude oil, being an island and having an energy isolated system. And this is basically one of the key arguments that is used to promote these mega energy projects in Cyprus at the moment. So they're using these, our politicians using these arguments to end the energy isolation of Cyprus with any other direct physical connection to the other countries in the area, mainly Greece and Israel. There's still a lot of recorded energy poverty in the island. We have a very small percentage in renewable shares. We are still below the 20%. Energy efficiency is not promoted enough. We have some schemes in order to renovate the houses, but still, I mean, it's not in a large scale, and they are very isolated and sporadic. And we have an energy authority which is operating under a monopoly system, and they are not willing to take the next step in terms of updating and having a just energy transition in Cyprus. At the moment, we don't have any gas infrastructure, so it's very weird for us, and it's very ridiculous to bring something new now in 2022, while Europe is moving into renewables and promoting other directives such as energy efficiency and energy savings. At the moment, what is planned, we have the gas fields out of the south coast of Cyprus. There is plans for an LNG onshore terminal with some other ideas, including the floating terminal unit, the FRSLU, and of course the great EastMed pipeline, the mega energy project, and the Euro-Asia connector that was announced in the beginning of the year. This is a map that shows basically how the gas fields are now and what are the licenses given to which companies. The presentation will be available to all. I mean, so don't worry about if you don't if you miss anything. And for the LNG terminal, it is planned to be in the constructed in the area of Vasilikos. It's going to cost 289 million. The project received loans from different banks, from the Connecting Europe Facility, the European Investment Bank, and the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. And it will get some contribution from local players, such as the Energy Agency of Cyprus, the Energy Authority of Cyprus, sorry. We have some updates that this project is going to end until 2022. but still there's nothing going on at the site. So we are very much certain that this project is going to stay as it is. This is basically the consortium with all the foreign investors, and this is the site at the moment. So there's nothing done here. So basically, the whole situation is that we have the gas fields. Some of these gas fields are going to be connected with the EastMed pipeline, and from the EastMed pipeline, the liquefied natural gas will be transported to the LNG terminal, maybe not, and that would be used for exports. This is the map of the EastMed pipeline. So it will start by the Levantine basis, has a stop, the first stop in Cyprus, followed by Crete, going on to Greece, and then the Poseidon department of the pipeline will head on to the southern of Italy. This is a huge project, so it's one of the largest and deepest in the world. It will get it will get deep into the sea, more than 2,000 kilometers. Sorry, it will be 2,000 kilometers long, including the Poseidon part, and it will be 3 kilometers below the sea level. The estimations that we get now from the media and from announcements from the companies that the construction is going to be finished by 2025. Still, there's nothing going on, and it's very unpredictable to say that this project is going to end up by then. So we are expecting major delays on that one, and the cost is going to be around 6 billion euros. The companies and the mergers that are behind this project, so it's IGI Poseidon, and this is a more detailed map and where it's going to go deeper in the sea, and where it will also start. So you can also see the parts that also Israel is involved in. The EastMed is a project of common interest. I have some links here to see the links to the PCI maps and how the Europe's gas is connected with EastMed. But EastMed, the problem is it's not just a mega gas project that we are against in terms of environmental issues. It is also used as a political tool by Israel, Greece, and Cyprus in order to serve as a catalyst for peace, stability, and cooperation in the region. However, there is a lot of geopolitical tensions that are going on in the area. Except from the fact that the offshore gas fields are overlapping and conflicting in certain national claims, this is a very highly sensitive and unstable area in terms of peace. It's a very fragile area, and politicians using and promoting gas pipelines in order to promote peace, it is a tool for their own political targets. And we have a lot of prime ministers and politicians claiming that this project is going to be the salvation, let's say, for whatever is going on in the area. However, that is not the case. We have instances with Turkey and Erdogan sending various ships since 2018 that is disturbing basically the peace and the well-being of the people in the island. The EU's involvement now, it provided significant financial support to the EastMed pipeline in order to get some reports and research done in terms of feasibility, the environmental impact assessment, but we haven't seen the final environmental impact assessment still for this mega project as a whole. I've mentioned the fact that it's included in the projects of common interest list. And since we have this, the avoidance to dependence on Russian gas and all these political issues, EastMed is also kind of reviving and brought back from the dead. However, this project is extremely expensive. The distance, even though in the map it showed that as being very small, it is very large. And having this infrastructure built in 2025 in the best case scenario, it gives great concerns that this project will be a stranded asset. So you're going to build it, and then if it's not used in other ways, then if we phase out gas completely as an EU, then this project is not going to be of any use. And there is research now that shows that Europe already has the infrastructure that it needs in terms of gas. And having this strategic exploitation of gas resources around Europe is something that was considered a little bit costly without economic feasibility. But even if we have the rising prices at the moment, it is an unstable market for the gas prices. And we have a lot of questions about if this project is feasible, is viable, and it's sustainable. Also, if we take into account all the global climate agreements that Cyprus and Greece is signing, then this project has no share in the table. Talking about the environment, the Eastern Mediterranean is a very diverse and a very fragile ecosystem, and it's a very important source of biodiversity. And having this deep pipeline, it creates significant technical problems, and it will destroy a lot of the protected areas, marine protected areas in the region. It's very deep. It's very difficult to detect and repair any possible leaks. And this is an area with a high seismic and geologically unstable activity. So having this infrastructure there, it provides a lot of concerns for us. I would not talk a lot on the fossil gas and what is methane, and how these leaks are, and the production that the East Med will do, because it makes a lot of sense that if you build this huge infrastructure, then you're going to have a lot of methane released in the atmosphere, and therefore having more impact on the climate crisis cases. So what do we have now as updates and information on the EastMed pipeline? There is this private company that was commissioned by IGI Poseidon, that basically said that the project is viable and it's feasible and it's very mature. We don't have this report from this company, this feasibility statement. We only have the press release that they issued in the beginning of in middle of June, and we're still waiting to see what they mean by feasible, what they mean by economically viable, and what is the environmental impact assessment for this project. We wait now to see if we're going to reach a final investment decision by 2022. So if the investors are even going to pay any attention to this project, and we still have this timeline until 2025 to build EastMed, let's say to construct EastMed. However, in EastMed is still in the PCI list. This was voted in early April, so it remains eligible for EU funding. But beginning of this month, like 6 days ago, the Parliament voted a boost for renewable use and LNG savings. So we need to get into a line to see if we actually need this new infrastructure from other places that are very sensitive in Europe, instead of promoting renewables. It is an explosive geopolitical initiative. Marginalizing Turkey brings a lot of consequences. to the people of the island, to the whole of people in the island, and showing that if we create synergies with other countries, that would bring us safety. That means that we have an explosive project going on, and we are promoting this explosive project, but we don't have other means in order to promote peace and safety of the region. And also, there is a heavy militarization of the area. What is the US saying about this? The US is not supporting the project as such. It claims that the project is not economically viable. But on the other hand, 3 days ago, that was Friday, the US lifted the arms embargo on Cyprus. So this creates a new era, a new dangerous era for us, that we're gonna have any parts of the Cyprus being even more heavily militarized that already is. The head of the Secretary of State for Political Affairs from the US stated that this project is going to take more than 10 years to be built. That is too expensive. So US not supporting this project is something that is somehow positive for our campaign, but still it's not helping with the human rights and the arms deals. Of course, I mean, we had threats and reactions from Erdogan and Turkey, and also a lot of implications when we're talking about the peace negotiations and also how we move and solve the Cyprus problem. This is also media attention on how the fossil gas and East Med pipeline brings tension in the Cyprus talks, in the peace negotiation talks, and how both sides are using it for negotiations, which is not something that we need. We need a peace deal that it brings people on the forefront, and it's for the people. There is local opposition on fossil gas. There's a lot of action that has been done by the local civil society, by initiatives and organizations. And to close, these our demands is to have an island that has 100% renewable and safe energy resources, and we have an energy future. No fossil gas infrastructure in Cyprus, there is no point. And it's not economically, financially, and environmentally sustainable. We need more financing on renewable energy projects and a just transition to an energy sustainable future. As you can see from this graph, Cyprus, being a very sunny island in the Mediterranean, is very low on the renewable energy share in terms of the EU. So what we're trying to do is putting all these finances into more renewable energy projects, bringing energy safety in the area, and having a political will to have a just energy transition. And this is it for me. I would like to thank everyone very much.
Thank you so much for the very valuable information, and thank you for willing to share your presentation with us. Very much appreciated. And now we're going to our last speaker, Dr. Susan Power, Head of Legal Research and Advocacy at Al-Haq. She will talk more about the legal aspect and violations of human rights by implementing these two projects. Dr. Susan, the floor is yours.
That's great. Thanks very much. And I suppose the best way to start is just with an initial explanation of what the Euro-Asia Interconnector is. So the Euro-Asia Interconnector is also referred to as the electricity highway, and this will effectively link the electricity grids of Israel, which includes the Israeli settlements, to Europe through Cyprus and then onto Greece. And it will provide for electricity to the European market. And there are essentially like two legs of this project. So we have the part from Israel to Cyprus, and then we have from Cyprus to Greece. However, the implementation of the Euro-Asia Interconnector project for us, as far as we can see, will contribute to the entrenchment of Israel's illegal settlements and its ongoing de facto annexation and apartheid of the occupied Palestinian territory. And there are numerous violations all along the supply chain, from the supply of electricity, from solar panel fields in the settlements in the Jordan Valley. There's discriminatory allocation of electricity to Palestinians. There's land appropriations for electricity infrastructure in the occupied Palestinian territory. But for today, we'll focus more narrowly on violations of international humanitarian law and international human rights law, which is related to the supply of gas to the electricity grid. So just to kind of start off with the Israel Electric Corporation. So the Israel Electric Corporation, this was previously known as the Palestine Electricity Corporation, and it's the main supplier of electrical power in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territory. So it basically builds, maintains, and operates power generation stations, substations, as well as the transmission and distribution networks, both within Israel and within the illegal settlements. But it's also really important to know that the Israel Electric Corporation is also on the steering committee of the Euro-Asia Interconnector Limited. So already we have a huge problem here. But importantly, the Israel Electric Corporation operates and controls both Israel's and Palestine's national electric grid, and controls 75% of the electricity generation. It's also important to point out that the Israel Electric Corporation's electricity infrastructure and operations, it serves Israel and the Israeli settlements in the occupied Palestinian territory with one integrated and inseparable electricity grid. So this unit, this electricity grid, is inseparable by design. In terms of the electrical grid, so the control of the electrical grid is really critical to Israel's colonization of Palestine. And back in 1967, at the beginning of the occupation, Israel took control over Palestine's electricity grid, and it integrated it into the Israeli electricity system. And even this action in itself violated Article 43 and Articles 55 of the Hague Regulations, which govern the occupying powers administration of occupied territory. And this really prohibits the alienation of the public immovable property of the occupied territory. And then after the 1973 war, Israel required that Palestinian electricity companies had to connect to the Israeli grid, and it basically forces them to purchase electricity from Israel, and it makes Palestine energy dependent on Israel. And this relationship is a form of corporate capture. And we also know that gas from Israel's offshore fields is converted into energy through 4 different substations, and these are owned by the Israel Electric Corporation. And this is transmitted onto the grid through substations and transmitters. So one of the main fields, one of the main Israeli gas fields is the Tamar gas field. And this gas field generates approximately 60% of Israel's electricity. And it's connected to the Mari B storage facility by a gas tieback. And this gas is then piped from Tamar, and it's sold to the Israeli domestic market by the Israel natural gas line system. And in 2014, the Israeli Electric Corporation stated that about 98.6% of its natural gas that it was supplying through the company to the domestic market was coming from the Tamar field. So it's a really important field in terms of the electricity production. Really important to Palestine and to the occupied Palestinian territory is the location of the Mari B storage facility. So the Mari B field It's an old gas field and it's now a storage facility. It's the storage facility for the Tamar field. And this is Israel's second largest gas field. And this is an integral and pivotal part of Israel's domestic gas infrastructure. It's the location of this which is really important. And the Mari B storage facility is located just 13 nautical miles from the Gaza coast. So you could nearly swim to it. And there's a single pipeline is used for the gas transportation, and Israel's electricity production is very much dependent on this. So securing this pipeline and securing this gas storage facility is really pivotal and integral. It's a really important part of Israel's gas infrastructure. And Israel has said that any interference with the orderly supply of gas would pose a grave challenge to the production system. And then we had in the Globe's newspaper a number of years ago, a lieutenant colonel from the Israeli Navy, and he described how the Navy attacks fishermen who come close to these gas platforms and storage facilities. And he said in the Globe's newspaper that vessels that approach within 7 miles of the platforms will be intercepted by one of the Navy's patrol boats. He said the intruder will be ordered to leave, and if it refuses, warning shots will be fired. And this happens on a daily basis because, as he said, Gaza fishermen like to insist on their right to fish wherever they feel like it. So we know here there is an admission of indiscriminate attacks on Palestinian civilian fishermen who fish near the platforms. And for us, the Euro-Asia interconnector will effectively be receiving gas through pipelines from an area which Israel holds under a naval blockade, and it's therefore under an international armed conflict. And it's in an area of the sea where we know that Israel indiscriminately attacks Palestinian fishermen. Previously, Israel has depleted gas in Palestine's border field. So in 2011, Israel unilaterally depleted gas from Palestine's contiguous border field, and it's contiguous with the Israeli field, the Noah field on the Israeli side. This is a joint gas field between Palestine and Israel. And the gas here was unilaterally converted into electricity to supply the Israeli domestic market by Israel in 2011. So these acts, which depleted Palestine's natural gas resources, again, are absolutely prohibited under international humanitarian law, and they amount to the war crime of pillage. And this crime is potentially prosecutable as a war crime in the International Criminal Court. And also an important vital part of Israel's gas infrastructure is the El Arish pipeline. And there's a lot of talk about this more recently, especially with the recent memorandum of understanding with the EU between Israel and Egypt. But Israel very heavily relies on this pipeline, which is in blue here, for the export of electricity. But for us, this pipeline has very serious implications for the ongoing closure of the Gaza Strip. So this pipeline is really a strategic asset. It was the subject of a $15 billion gas agreement a number of years ago between Noble Energy and Delek Drilling and the East Mediterranean Gas Company. Noble Energy has since been bought out by Chevron. But importantly, it's located in the Gaza maritime zone under the Oslo Accords. Again, it's very close to the Gaza coast. It's only 13 nautical miles off the Gaza coast. And it must be also noted that Delek Drilling, one of the companies that is invested in this pipeline, is also one of the companies that's listed on the UN's database of companies that are illegally active in the settlements. And so that's also a problem for Europe doing any deals in terms of gas with this company, which is already a company listed on the UN database. But importantly, Palestinians can't even enter this part of the sea. It's been under coastal closure since the Second Intifada, and also under a naval blockade since 2009. And again, any fishermen fishing too close to the pipeline and going beyond distances of 6 nautical miles are also routinely shot at. We know also that Israel is supplying the settlements. So electricity is generated and supplied by the Israel Electric Corporation to Israel, the Israeli settlements, and onto Palestinian counterparts. So the Asherat industrial zone, this lies close to the Kalandia checkpoint in the occupied territory, and it's partially constructed on Al-Ram village lands. The annexation wall cuts right through here. It cuts Al-Ram village off from the village lands, and this has been appropriated for the Asherat settlement. Israel incentivizes businesses to operate in this settlement. It gives cheaper taxes and rents, and some of the lowest rents are applicable in the Asherat settlement. They're as low as 23 shekels, rents as low as 23 shekels per square meter. So the Israel Electricity Corporation operates a substation and a gas turbine at the Asherat industrial zone. And it's leased from the Israel Land Authority until 2022. And then there is a potential extension on the lease for another 49 years. So this is a direct issue with settlement gas. At the same time, there's a denial of gas. There's a denial of gas resources to Gaza. So despite the presence of massive gas fields in the very close proximity of the Gaza coast, Israel inflicts pretty much darkness on the Gaza Strip. So there are 2 electricity lines supplying the Gaza Strip, the Egyptian and the Israeli lines. So the Gaza Electricity Distribution Company is responsible for distributing electricity in the Gaza Strip. And then we have the Gaza power plant, which was developed to run off gas. However, Israel has systematically prevented the development of the gas infrastructure off the Gaza coast. And the power plant is primarily run by diesel, which is less efficient. So Israel controls the supply of gas and fuel for the power plant and controls its transit through the Israeli checkpoints. And since 2008, Israel has reduced electricity to the Gaza Strip, and it's reduced the supply of industrial diesel fuel for the power plant. And this has resulted in disconnections and power outages. And the power outages affect Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, and at many times they only have 4 hours of electricity and power per day. In terms of the West Bank, Palestinian electricity companies such as JEDCO cannot increase the capacity of electricity in the West Bank, and this is due to technical and operational limitations that Israel imposes. So, for example, in 2014, the Israel Electric Corporation reported failures in the electricity grid, and this was due to damage by winter storms. But during this time, the Israel Electric Corporation in the West Bank, and this left severe power shortages across the West Bank during the stormy months. The Director General of the Jerusalem Electricity Company, Saeed Hisham Omer, stated that the majority of the power line malfunctions are located inside Israel on the lines that lead into the West Bank. But the Israeli authorities in Israel do not fix the malfunctions, and they also prohibit the access of Palestinian crews into the area. And we also know that Palestinian electricity companies such as JEDCO are forced to supply the Israeli military administration in Bet El. So the military camp gets electricity from JEDCO, but there is no money from this transaction which goes to JEDCO, and JEDCO are left with no other option but to supply electricity for free to the military base. And Israel also denies electricity as a coercive environment. to force the transfer of Palestinian communities living near the settlements. So in terms of the Euro-Asia interconnector, by connecting Israel's electricity grid to the Euro-Asia interconnector, European states really risk breaching the United Nations Security Council Resolution 2334 and the obligation that they have to distinguish in their relevant dealings between the territory of the State of Israel and the territories occupied in 1967. The Israel settlement policy and practices also constitute a serious violation of peremptory norms, in particular the prohibition on the permanent acquisition of territory through use of force and the denial of Palestinian self-determination, along with violating international humanitarian law and international human rights law in acts which amount to war crimes and crimes against humanity. In particular, the EU project of common interest also breaches the EU Commission's own binding guidelines, which provides that no EU financial support can be granted to activities, projects and operations of Israeli entities taking place partially or entirely in the occupied Palestinian territory. So as such, the EU, by even entertaining this agreement, is in breach of its own internal regulations. Thank you.
Thank you so much for talking about the serious implications and the legal aspect and violations of human rights by implementing these two projects, mainly the Euro-Asia interconnector. Thank you so much. I would like now to ask Ms. Margaret Oken, our special guest from the Greens, EFA in the European Parliament, to share with us her thoughts on the issue. Ms. Margaret?
Thank you very much. And well, sorry, you don't have time to listen to all my thoughts here because, you know, I have collected thoughts on this here now for 30 years. And the only thing which really impresses me by myself is that I'm still on it, because you can really get so frustrated to be in this here and see how little happened. Yes, I just have a few things to say to all of you, but I also especially perhaps to Professor Tamimi, that it's not so bad in the EU as you described. There are awareness in many places, in Parliament, also in our quite weak Commission. It's not often recognized that we have not a Tarzan either. He's probably normally very, very passive, but there are things happening here and there, and there's awareness. What is really problematic is that we cannot mobilize the PA to anything. And that really frustrates me like hell, that we have a totally absence in the diplomacy. I have called for local Palestinian diplomats who are situated in most of the member states. Why don't they try to network and try to impress? Because a lot of things must happen now in the member states in the EU due to no common EU policy. If EU should act, then we need to have unanimous position. All of you know that. Now you, Susan, referred to several already existing laws in the EU and existing legislation. And of course, we should, if we were able to mobilize, also to sue the national governments for breaching their own laws. I think even in Germany, that could be very helpful if we mobilized some of the Palestine really have quite excellent lawyers, and we could get money from the from Palestinians abroad who would help them to do this here. But of course, it is very difficult as long as the PA, the Mahmoud Abbas complex, or what you will call it, is not doing anything. And it's not to turn the critique back, because none of you are, of course, responsible for that. I guess some of you are even very much suffering from what is happening at that level in Palestine. But we can see that it has, even if there are protests against, for instance, the E1 settlements and other things, it has some impact in Israel, even if it's so little what happens for the moment. And I will take, I've really been listening careful, and we have several of the things mentioned already now at the table, and we will try to come forward with it, and I will try to also in the delegation to Palestine and with the friends which are many places. But I must say one thing more. I was listening to Cyprus. It sounds to me as if nothing is happening with climate in Cyprus, that you can just are going on with business as usual, as if gas is the absolutely salvation of the situation in the world, which it is clearly not. And of course, I could not urge Gaza to try to build renewables, because I know what happens to Gaza every time they try to do anything. We have seen it so many times, and everything is seen as a threat to Israel. And there's not probably a terrorist nest under whatever. So the best help also to Gaza, to Palestine, could be if neighboring countries are much more eager to build out renewable energy. And Cyprus, with the way Cyprus is placed, then wind turbines, which are very efficient and very cheap now, in addition, could really create. They are also helpful to the environment in sea, because there we are really troubled. Where you place wind turbines, you will see that fishes, mussels, and so on is growing around these artificial reefs around the turbines, and it's very, very helpful to the sea environment. That goes for the Baltic Sea, that goes for North Sea, and I'm sure it goes also for the Mediterranean, even if the conditions are different there. So I'll ask you, are you really just in Cyprus continuing with business as usual, where the rest of Europe is suffering from burns, droughts, all the tough consequences of the climate change, which you have seen this summer, and with the wonderful promise from our meteorologists that this summer will be the coldest in the years to come, as far as they can see. So, the climate change is there. And I'm quite surprised to listen to the description of Cyprus as if it's not there. And I think it could be more helpful to, lots of other things should be done. And I would never deny that Palestine needs gas now, especially Gaza. But it's not to build out gas, which is the prospect of the future. And we have this critique heavily in our countries. What are you doing here? You act as if, we could continue like this. And if all the threats we have listened to now for more than 30 years, I've been calling for this here for more than 30 years. I'm very old, but still. But that would be my question to you. What is happening in Cyprus? Because Cyprus is so close to Israel-Palestine, as you clearly demonstrated. And to Tamimi and to Susan, how do you try to work with member states? What is happening at the EU member states? Because what we can mobilize at national level, in national parliaments, and that could be done, is very helpful in a situation where the Commission is so weak itself. And I can promise you, we will still come forward with questions, letters, as we have done, and you have the support, but not for the moment a majority. The situation is worse than it used to be, and that's of course very depressing, but it's there, and we have people very much aware that we have to do something that this year cannot continue. So thanks a lot for your great work, and I hope that some of the small things put at the table could be taken further on, and I know that if we don't get elections in Palestine, then I don't know what will happen, and it looks really depressing. But there is pressure from the EU on Mahmoud Abbas, on the PA, to really now to get out of this deadlock, democracy, the deadlock they are in, which is a burden for not only normal Palestinian people, for instance, the six human rights organization, where I have the fear that PA was not so much against what Israel did to them, because they are also criticizing the PA. And you can, Susan, perhaps tell me that I'm absolutely wrong here. And I hope I could hear that from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Margaret. Thank you for being with us today, and thank you for sharing some of your thoughts on the issue. I see in the chat that Ricardo, you have something to add?
Well, not to add, just to mention, since it is something that is going to be public very soon, as BDS movement, we are launching a campaign along these issues, and we will, for sure, we will denounce the crime of Israeli crime of pillage of Palestinian resources. At the same time, we will keep saying that gas is detrimental for the planet and is never the solution, and the only solution is to keep in the ground. Yet Palestinians have the right of complete sovereignty on their resources, on their lands, on their sea, and so what Israel is committing is against international law. So we will try to focus on both aspects of crime of Israel, and at the same time the vision on fossil fuels and on alternatives to fighting against climate change that are aligned with what climate movements have been saying in the past 20 years. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ricardo. I want to ask all the participants if any of you has a question or a comment to add. If not, maybe if one of the speakers wants to add like a 1-minute comment on any of the speeches.
Yes, Rasha, I want to add just 1 minute, okay?
Please do.
Yeah, first of all, I do share Margarita, the whole ideas she presented. Strongly, I support her ideas. I agree that the lack of performance of the Palestinian Authority, the lack of democracy, the lack of transparency in Palestinian Authority is part of the problem. Since 2 years, we are asking the Palestinian Authority through the so-called Palestinian Investment Fund, what is going on in the Mediterranean Gas Council, which is Palestine is a member. We don't know. We don't know what's going, why the Palestinians are there, what is the agenda, what is the conclusions from different meetings of the East Mediterranean Gas Council. There is a black box there. We don't know anything from the Palestinian Authority. However, this does not mean that Europe should not do anything because the Palestinian Authority is lack of democracy or lacking transparency. Europe is the biggest donor to the Palestinian Authority, and they have to ask them not to cut the donation. We need that donation because that donation goes to the people, not only to the authority. But we need to use the weight of Europe to force the Palestinians to have an election. Election is the entry point for transparency, democracy, and other issues. Without democracy, nothing can be done. Even not only election. Now the whole authorities in one man hand. If we have one man show, even the cabinet, the prime minister, nothing to do, has no function. Everything is in a presidential office, and in a presidential office, one person. That's Europe has a ethical duty to ask the Palestinian Authority to carry out democracy, to carry out election. Without these pressures from outside, it's difficult to make the Palestinian Authority a good player in the Eastern Mediterranean, or even a big defender on Palestinian rights. Europe has ethical and political capacity to do so. The second thing is Israel. Israel is using time and benefiting from the silence of Arabs and Europe to explore the Palestinian natural resources, not only gas in the Mediterranean, but water, electricity. Nowadays, we are depends on 98% of our electricity to the Israeli company, and the Palestinian company only distributor. Gaza, Gaza also suffering from lack of electricity, lack of water, lack of dignity. Actually, the most important issue in Gaza, the people lacking dignity, not only water and electricity and this materialistic things, but also they lack dignity. And Europe, they have the ability and the ethical responsibility to ask to open Gaza Strip and to make the people breathe as a human being, and to live as normal citizens. Some people in Gaza, 20 years old, young people, they never visited West Bank, and it is part of their country. They don't know what is Jerusalem. This is also part of that. That's why, if I conclude, the gas issue, the water issue, natural resources issue, it's integrated. We cannot deal with Palestinian problems separately, one by one. Should be in one package. That is, the Palestinian needs democracy and needs freedom. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tamimi. I want to ask Dr. Susan if she has any comment or addition to add.
Thanks very much, and thanks as well to Margaret for raising some of those questions, and yeah, especially around some of the work that we've been doing with member states. And I think some of the problem, and I'd echo there what Professor Tamimi was saying, in relation to the Palestinian Authority and the state of Palestine. And this has been, the silence here is very problematic, you know, when it comes to the resources, when it comes to the gas pipeline, when it comes to exploitation of resources off the Palestinian coast. But we're in a bit of a different situation than we were even a couple of years ago, and even since Palestine joined the East Mediterranean Gas Forum, they have finally deposited their coordinates of delimitation with the Secretary General of the United Nations for their exclusive economic zone. And also, like, there's an extra provision in this document which provides that companies that are operating in the exclusive economic zone without the consent of Palestine may potentially be subject to, may potentially be liable. So we're in a very different situation than we were a few years ago, and Palestine has really kind of staked out its claim to the sea. And the EU entering a memorandum of understanding without the consent of Palestine is really opening itself up. And we have even previous case law on comparatively from the European Court of Justice in relation to the Polisario Front and the pillage of fishing resources off Western Sahara. And again, those types of agreements were not recognized and shouldn't have been recognized without the consent of the Polisario Front. And I think we would see the same, it's a similar application of the law, and I think we would see the same when it comes to Palestine. But really what we should have seen from the state of Palestine is very loud and clear objections to what is basically state practice in the area, concluding pipeline agreements without their consent, and a very strong statement of condemnation. We haven't seen that coming out yet. But I think there's internal advocacy that can be done on this. The main advocacy will need to be done because of the weakened position with in Europe will have to be done at a member state level. And we're aware of the big fight really that we have on our hands with this. Just to explain how critical it is that this gas agreement does not go through, especially for the supply of gas from the Leviathan field through pipelines that go off the Palestinian coast and onto Egypt, and then as liquefied natural gas through the European market. The security that Israel will put along this pipeline will mean that Gaza will be closed and blockaded for decades and decades and decades to come. And this is collective punishment of 2 million people in Gaza. That's what we're looking at when we're supplying gas to the European market. We're looking at the persecution, collective punishment, denial of human rights, denial of permits for children, for women, for civilians in Gaza to get a treatment abroad in Israel and in the rest of Palestine for medical treatment. And that's what we're seeing, the persecution of the people. That's what these gas deals mean. And it's really imperative, that at a member state level, that countries look equally, what's happening in Palestine is the same as what's happening in Ukraine. They're both attacks, they're both violating the territorial integrity of the state, and we need the same standards applied to each. And that's where our advocacy will lie over the next couple of months as we try to push against this. In terms of the designations, with the designations, we did see we saw Israel raid in the middle of the night, and that would have needed security coordination in Area A, which is problematic. And we did have the next day the Palestinian Minister of Foreign Affairs coming to the organization and into Al-Haq in particular for a photo moment. And we also had previously President Mahmoud Abbas receiving Al-Haq and the designated organizations in a show of support. So I think at a fundamental level there is support there, but at the same time we did see a security coordination, for them to even be able to have raided and come into Area A in the first place, which is very, very problematic. And the weakness of the Palestinian Authority as well abroad, the weakness in Brussels, and especially when we're trying to push against these types of agreements, is very, very problematic. So this is an uphill struggle, but it's one that I think it's critically important. When Europe is doing business with gas agreements and with electricity coming from Israel, this is dirty business. This implicates the settlements, and this violates and breaches the right of self-determination of the Palestinian people and prolongs and fuels the ongoing conflict and the ongoing colonization.
Thank you so much, Dr. Susan. Before we wrap up, I would like to hear from Ms. Natasha.
Yes, just also a wrapping up comment on this is that especially the governments of this regional are lacking political will. So this is also the same in promoting gas in Greece and in Cyprus as well. They failed to understand the benefits in the future of what we have, and the good background that would bring in having safe and renewable energy sources. So it is a term of political will. It's not a term of technology or economical means, which is something that inside it needs to be worked on as well on the political level. I would also like to thank Pengon for the invitation. It was a great event, and yes, this is it for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I would like to, at this point, thank you all for participating and enjoying this fruitful discussion about the EU's common interest projects and Israel's illegal exploitation of Palestinian fossil fuel resources. Thank you all for attending this webinar with us. Thank you so much for the speakers and for the very valuable information shared with us. Thank you so much, Ms. Margaret, for being with us. Thank you.